This episode is brought to you by Kia's first 3-row all-electric SUV, the Kia EV9, with available all-wheel drive and seating for up to 7 adults, with a 0 to 60 speed that thrills you 1 minute and available reclining lounge seats that unwind you the next. Visit kia.com/EV9 to learn more. Ask your Kia dealer for availability. No system, no matter how advanced, can compensate for all driver error and or driving conditions. Always drive safely.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with CORE HRIR in India about effective data-driven approaches to managing employee performance.
Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you. I am Jyoti Sharma, your host for the day. In an endeavor to continue with our legacy of learning, we have come up with our 12th Learning Weekday webinar. So we are going full house on weekdays as well now. I genuinely appreciate all of you who took time out for this journey of knowledge sharing, especially on a weekday. Our thought leader for today is Mr. Jonathan H. Westover, and he'll be empowering us through his insights on the topic managing employee performance, HR analytics, and employee assessment. Before we start with the webinar, a little bit about the CORE HRIR team. We are specifically a group of 1,000 plus HR professionals who are connected with each other through a string of knowledge. Our endeavor is specifically to share knowledge with each other, to learn and to grow together. In a short span of time, we have come up with various initiatives, through which we have been connected with HR professionals who are based out of various locations globally and overseas, India as well as globally. We have HR leaders and CHROs from Fortune 500 companies, and together we aim at fostering and nurturing long-term relationships wherein we all grow through each other's insights in our personal and professional lives. Since our very inception, we have come up with initiatives that play a catalyst role in grooming leaders for tomorrow through learning and sharing today through our experts. We have WhatsApp interactive platform where all the HR professionals network, collaborate, and share their expertise with each other. The next initiative is the Learning Weekend webinar, wherein, and today being our 12th session, and we have our thought leaders and experts who share their insights with us. Then we have our Chai Buddy series, wherein all HR professionals meet face-to-face, discuss new ideas, initiatives, industry practices, and the latest trends. Another initiative is the job board, which is essentially to provide all HR professionals with career opportunities in HR globally. Our next initiative is the Shining HR Award, which aims to felicitate outstanding and deserving HR professionals. So we are all in all trying to be an all-inclusive group that aims to augment and take human resource development to the next level. Moving back to our much awaited session, and I can promise that you'll stay glued to the webinar. Such is an aura of our speaker and thought leader for today, Mr. Jonathan H. Westover. He is a PhD, Masters in Public Administration. He's a Senior Fellowship of Higher Education Academy, a CIPD. He's also an Associate Professor of Organization Leadership in Woodbury School of Business. He's a Director of Academic Service Learning and Center of Social Impact. He was previously the Associate Director of the Center of Study of Ethics. He is a human capital leadership and performance management consultant as well. He was recently a Fulbright Scholar in Indonesia. He's a POSCO Fellow at East West Center, Washington. He's also a visiting scholar at Wilson Center. In fact, there's a lot more to his accolades, and I could spend the next entire 1 hour speaking about him. But yes, he's definitely somebody who's very famous in the media. His articles have been published in academic journals, books, magazines like Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and USA Today. A little bit about myself. I'm Jyoti Sharma. I have 12 years of experience in HR. I'm currently working with British High Commission, and I've previously worked with companies like British Council, Aon Hewitt, and IBM. So, moving back to our webinar, our topic for today is managing employee performance, HR analytics, and employee assessment. So without wasting any more time, I would, request Mr. Jonathan to take it over from here.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for the introduction.
Yes, John, over to you.
Okay, and for just a few minutes, I thought we could have me on video so you can get a chance to see and know, put a face with a name, and then in a few minutes we'll go back to the prepared slide deck so that you can see the slides as I talk through the different topics and issues. But I do appreciate the invitation to join you, and I appreciate the introduction. It was a very kind introduction. HR is certainly an area that I love and have continued to do a lot of work in. And I think the topic today is something both of increasing relevance and importance, but also just a really fun and fascinating topic to be able to explore. I saw many of the questions that were submitted by those who registered for this webinar in advance, and there are many really interesting questions, far more questions than I think we'll have an opportunity to really address today. But I do hope that we'll have a good amount of time to do some Q&A at the end. So my intention is to take the next 35 minutes or so to talk through the slide deck and some of my thoughts on some of these issues, and then we'll take the remaining time for questions. With that, if we can go ahead and put up the slides again, and we'll start working our way through those. All right, and if you can go to the agenda slide, please. This lays out what I hope to cover with you. This is a rather ambitious agenda, and I'm not sure we'll actually have time for all of this, but the materials are in the slides, and I believe the slides will be shared with all who registered. So even if we don't get a chance to get to everything, that you'll have a chance to look through and think through some of the different materials. So first, I wanted to provide a little bit more of a personal introduction beyond just credentials and education and such. And then we'll move directly into looking at the context for HR analytics and employee assessment, because I think we have a changing nature of work and we have disruptive innovations and technologies that are influencing HR and how we'll be doing our work in the future. And so it's important to consider the environment in which we'll be doing performance management and various assessments of employees in the future. So we'll start there. Then we'll talk for a little bit, just laying the groundwork for people analytics, and then get into performance evaluation systems, completing and conducting the appraisal, and training managers and employees. And again, those last couple bullets we may or may not actually have time to get to, but that's all right. And I think I'll at least talk to them briefly if we don't have time to get to them more thoroughly. So if we can go to the next slide, a little bit more about myself and some of my recent work for anyone who might be interested. So just recently, I think this came out maybe 2 months ago, but I had a SHRM article on the Society for Human Resource Management magazine website on the future of work, and looking at a variety of books that explore the future of work. So it's basically my top 5 list of books that are must-reads by CHROs and other HR professionals about what work will look like in the coming decades. And I think that's a pretty relevant thing for all of us to be considering. I have a new book that just came out back in October, Shifting Trajectories in Globalization, Labor, and the Transformation of Work. This was about a 10-year project that culminated in this book publication with I believe including academic research that will help us understand and frame where we've come over the last 50 years in terms of the nature of work and how globalization and innovation has transformed that, but also thoughts and ideas of where we might be going into the future. And then just, I thought I would offer it out there as a free resource to everybody. My main job, my main gig here is at my home university at Utah Valley University, and that's where I am today. That's the office I'm sitting in right now, and you could see in the background when I was on the screen. And one of my initiatives has been to try to get away from expensive textbooks for our students. And so I've created a series of open education resource textbooks that are completely free. And so one of them you see up here is Strategic Human Resource Management. It's basically an introductory human resource management textbook. It's completely free. You can get the PDF for free, or you can order off of Amazon a very cheap print copy of it. That's just cost of printing and shipping. So if anyone is interested in that kind of a resource, that's free and available to you, as well as some of the other materials that I've done. And I've published a lot in academic journals and other areas related to international employee engagement, worker satisfaction, the changing nature of work, and all those types of topics. So I would be happy to talk with any of you offline after this webinar about some of my work or some of your work, what you're doing. Perhaps there's opportunities to collaborate. I'd be open to all of those sorts of opportunities. All right, if we can go to the next slide, please. So I thought I'd start today with just a basic quote. This is something you've probably heard before, but I think it's particularly relevant. So Peter Drucker has famously been known to say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that's when we talk about people analytics, we talk about performance management, we're constantly trying to think about what are the right measures, and how do those measures, and how does the act of measuring those things, how does that influence employee attitudes, behaviors, and performance? And so I provide that quote just as a foundational piece for what we're going to talk about this morning. Oh, I apologize. It's morning for me. It's evening for you. Talk about this evening, and if we can always just remember how truly difficult it can really be to choose the right measures, so that we're aligning our performance management systems with our company, our desired vision, mission, company culture, all of those sorts of things, so that we're in alignment. That's the main point, and that's what we're driving for when we're trying to have positive employee performance management. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I thought that we could talk for a few minutes about the changing trajectories of work, because it lays the groundwork for what we're looking at into the future. Now, of course, nobody has a crystal ball. We don't actually know, what work will look like in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. But what we do have are trends, and we can see patterns, and we can see what's been happening over the last 50 years, and we can see the exponential growth in certain high-tech areas and types of technology and innovations. And so we can consider the possibilities of what might happen into the future. So I thought it would be worthwhile to talk through that a little bit. And now, of course, over the last 50 years, what have we seen? We've seen globalization. We've seen an increasing interconnectedness of the global economy. We've seen products and services moving from having, take automobiles, for example. Back when automobiles were new on the scene, you had really just a few options. But over time, and particularly over the last 40 or 50 years, what we've seen in pretty much all markets and in all types of product categories is that consumer demand for variation and unique types of products that serve specific purposes for them. And so that's driven a hyper competitiveness in the global economy. That's triggered the need for organizations who want to remain relevant and successful, to be responsive and adaptive to the increasingly nuanced consumer demand, to provide a wide variety of products and services with a huge variety of looks and feels. So, for example, today, when you think about automobiles, how many different makes and models and variations in terms of color and style and special features, that's pretty typical now of most product offerings that are out there on the market today. And that's meant a lot of change for work. We've also seen, because of technology, we've seen a shift from a largely industrial sector in the kind of modern Western world to a more service-oriented economy. So lots of financial service jobs, lots of tech service jobs, those sorts of things. And so whereas 50 years ago, several generations back, my grandfather might have gone to work out of high school and worked at a factory, or worked at one job for the course of his career, moving up over time. And we just know that over time that model has gone away in the Western world, and increasingly in the global South, we see similar changes happening. We've seen tremendous changes just over the last decade in the industrial sector of the Chinese economy, for example, and in Southeast Asia. And so I think we're seeing similar types of things happening globally, that the types of work that people are performing and the way that they perform it has always been in flux and always been shifting, and the nature and the rapidity of that shift has only been increasing in recent decades. So that gets us kind of to the present day, and then we're trying to think about, well, what does this mean for our future? If we can go to the next slide, I thought I would just share briefly some of the thoughts that came out of last January's World Economic Forum. There's a particular panel of global leaders, business leaders, that explored the global business context and what they expect to see in the coming decade. And so you see on the screen here a picture of the panelists that were included, and I tried to distill. It's probably an hour and a half long panel. It's really interesting. You can go look it up and watch the whole thing. But I tried to distill down some of the main points that they were trying to hit home. And these are points that were made repeatedly by pretty much everyone on the panel. And again, try to keep in mind what this means for the future of work, the future of HR, the future of HR technologies, and how that intersects with performance management of our people. So they see in the coming decades a movement from a linear setup, organizational structure, to more of a lattice connected framework, where organizations and employees that are currently set up in more of a hierarchical structure with divisions, that'll become more, the matrix approach to organizational design will become more common. There'll be more of a latticed approach, and You'll have interconnected functions. And so, rather than being siloed in a marketing division doing marketing stuff, over time, those individuals likely will have to be cross-trained and have the ability to do tasks across a range of different types of professional duties. So this is a world of work where employees are doing all activities at all times. In this new environment, these global leaders see the leader as a necessary challenger. That gone will be the days of a leader to maintain the status quo because of the hyper-competitive nature of the global economy, and that only seems to ramp up faster and faster. That if you want organizations to be successful, you have to be a leader. You have to have a leader in that organization, or you have to be that leader who will constantly be challenging the status quo, who will constantly be pushing the envelope, be pushing innovation, who will assume challenge and disruption in the industry and with the products and services that are being provided, in the nature of work itself and in the nature of the employees that do the work of the organization. That we need leaders as challengers and disruptors. And that's kind of flies in the face of traditional models of leadership. Now, certainly, there's always been a push in recent decades for strategic leadership and to be thinking forward and forecasting and all those sorts of things. But they're arguing for something a little bit more dramatic than that. They're arguing for someone who really can push the organization out of their comfort zone, challenging all preconceived notions and pushing forward. They also talked repeatedly about a push towards a reskilling agenda within companies to create value, because the war and the battle to get good workers and the fight for labor, that's going to become intensified. I don't know what the current unemployment rate is where you are located currently, but in the United States, it's really low. And it's actually too low in most places, particularly in higher high-tech, higher skilled, and higher education types of jobs. And so we don't have enough people that are actually available actively looking for jobs. And what that means is there's a real fight for talent. And we can't assume that we're always just going to be able to go out and find new good people to come into the organization. So we have to be able to attract good people, retain those good people, and then find ways to reskill them. That we can encourage lifelong learning and help all of our people constantly be reinventing themselves as employees and as in what they do, the daily tasks that they're responsible for, and the types of skills that are utilized on a day-to-day basis. They also, of course, talked about the displacement of jobs. So there's the famous PricewaterhouseCoopers report that came out a couple years ago that projects that 40% of jobs will be replaced or displaced in the next 15 years. Now, that's a little crazy to think about, right? 40% of all current jobs being replaced or displaced. Now, will that actually happen? Of course, we don't know if that'll actually happen, but we've seen some trajectory that way already, and we know over the course of the Industrial Revolution that this has always occurred, right? We anytime there's been new innovations, anytime there's been new technologies, we've replaced jobs, we've automated jobs, and that will continue to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's jobs will go away, but that does mean that we'll have new jobs, that we'll have different types of jobs that we probably can't even conceive of right now in the next couple of decades. So new professions, new industries, or new types of work across industries will emerge, and organizations will have to be super agile to be able to respond to that need for that kind of talent. We won't be able to rely just on universities to train people, because universities tend to lag a little bit in how they upskill the future workforce. it's going to be a large responsibility on organizations to help their people to do that, so that they can have a strong human capital that will help them be successful. Along with that, the hunt for talent in a robotic and automated economy. They argued that pretty much all companies in the future will be tech companies in some way, in some fashion, from retail to food to certainly existing tech companies. Everything will have such a strong interface with how technology is utilized, and artificial intelligence and robotics and all these things, that will simply have to know how to do technology well, and will have to have a high level of technology skill set across types of employees. So, for example, I direct our HR program here at my home university. We teach all of the normal HR courses and try to prepare our students. But in recent years, we've added courses in human resource information systems and HR, people analytics, and other technology-driven HR types of functions. And increasingly, what I expect is that every single student that we graduate out of our program, that they will, even if they want to be a trainer or they want to be an organizational development consultant, those traditionally haven't been areas of HR that require a high level of tech capacity or skill set, right? But in the future, every HR person, really every person within an organization that's a high-functioning organization, will have to have tech skills, and they'll have to be held accountable for developing those tech skills. So that's an interesting thing to think about as we try to figure out how to prepare for the future. And then, of course, we have the shifting geopolitical landscape, the rise of China and India, the global south. The global order is changing. Things are shifting. It's not Cold War era Russia versus the USSR versus the US kind of dynamic anymore. That's long gone, and so this means that we can't take for granted old structures and systems. We can't take for granted the way things have been done in the past. That makes it really difficult to forecast. That makes it really difficult to really plan strategically, but we have to give it our best shot. If we can go to the next slide, please. So here you can see, we don't have time to go through this in great detail, but I thought it's a useful graphic to show you how different elements are leading to the changing landscape. So when we think about the future of work, we have all these different components. We have the underlying drivers of the change in the future of work. Those influence economic structures, that influences labor displacement, and that then creates the emerging landscape. So, for example, if we just look at the blue underlying drivers for just a second, and we think about, for example, the connectivity issue, the globalized access to everything, the internet, the democratization of information, the fact that we are doing what we're doing right now, where there's people from all over the globe in different time zones meeting synchronously at the same time, seamlessly, using a very basic free technology that we can interact and share knowledge with each other. That's a perfect example of connectivity, and that's only increasing, and that's increased tremendously even over the last decade. Machine capabilities, artificial intelligence, we'll talk more about that. Demographic shifts, the aging workforce. And this is an issue in many countries, not certainly in the US it is, and in other places like Japan, and there's many places where it's a serious concern. But globally, there's demographic concerns about the aging workforce and skills gaps in the workforce, those sorts of things. And there's simply the shifting cultural values and social expectations that are shifting over time as well. And so the nature of our social interactions in the workplace are changing. Anyways, all of that then feeds into shifting economic structures with globalization. We then move into labor displacement. I talked a little bit about that. Ultimately, we find ourselves in a situation where we have a new emerging landscape of high-performance organizations in international markets, where education is is open and available to all. Again, the democratization of information that's curated in such a way that people can gain and improve their skill sets through stackable credentials and things like that. All of this is shifting the nature of higher education. It's shifting the nature of the workplace. If we can go to the next slide. So really quickly, to not get bogged down in this too much, but I thought we could talk for just a few minutes about some of the technologies that are going to be shifting labor markets. And maybe I'll just pick a couple of these. I think all of them are super interesting, and we could probably spend hours just on this slide talking through examples of all of these different types of technologies and labor markets that are associated with them. But let's take, for example, quantum entanglement. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the idea of quantum entanglement. It's a super fascinating development where basically, and this is not my field of research by any means. So I have a layman's understanding of the technology, but in China recently, scientists in China at the University of Science and Technology of China were able to at the molecular level make a change in a cell, and simultaneously that same change showed up across the globe in another cell. So they had connected these cells at the quantum level and then separated them across the globe, and then made it change to one, and it showed up immediately simultaneously in the other. So that's the idea of quantum entanglement. If we can connect things at the quantum level, then it creates instantaneous communication channels that doesn't require radio waves, it doesn't require Wi-Fi, it doesn't require cell networks. It just is connected. So you can imagine a world, I mean, we're nowhere close to this yet, but you can imagine in another 10, 20 years, a world where instead of everyone having a cell phone that requires us to pay expensive contracts, where we're getting cell service and cell companies that are putting up cell towers and constantly trying to upgrade to the next newest cell technologies, that we all have basically quantum communicators so we can communicate with anyone, anywhere, at any time with quantum level connectivity. That's a completely disruptive type of technology that would have tremendous implications for many, many labor markets, as well as all sorts of markets, right? It's just fascinating to even just kind of stop and think about it. So that's one example. Virtual presence. We've long had we've had virtual reality, we've had augmented reality. Those have been around for a while. We've had holograms, those sorts of things, and those technologies continue to get better and better. But imagine as virtual presence technology becomes improved, and as the price goes down, that you could have, instead of having a Google Hangout webinar like this, where people log in and they watch a live stream on YouTube or on Google Hangout or whatever, imagine in 10 years that we could all be virtually sitting in the same room together having this conversation, where it felt like and seemed like we were all in the same place. That's what virtual presence is. So it's not holograms that look like holograms, but it's actually the ability for us to look and feel like we're actually interacting with each other. This is the stuff of sci-fi, right? And it seems a little crazy, but it's on the horizon, and it's really not that far away. And that becomes a game changer when we're talking about global travel, for example. Let's talk a little bit. There's tons that has been said about blockchain that's out there that you can read about. Let's talk about, we'll just end on this slide talking a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning. With the exponential increase in processing power of computers, along with the rapid drop in the cost and expense of storage space, what we've seen is just the exponential rise in computing capacity, which fuels this artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so we already have many examples where this is being utilized in industry that's already started to displace jobs and also change the consumer experience. One thing that I've experienced personally on many occasions is just trying to get customer support on a product or service. And so I go to the website, and what happens pretty quickly when you go to a website and you want customer support, usually there's a chat bot that comes up, right? This little chat box comes up and someone's on there and they say, hey, how can I help you? This is my name and I'm going to try to assist you. Now, historically, when that's happened, that there's been a person behind that somewhere, just like we've had call centers that have supported customer support. We've also had centers where you have people on their computers supporting those dialogue boxes. Well, now we're getting better and better at having chat bots that are driven through artificial intelligence and machine learning. So there's no actual person there. And I don't know how often I go onto websites and it's actually a person or if it's actually just AI. I often can't tell the difference. But either way, they're helping me, right? They're helping me solve whatever problem I need to solve. And you can see how that has all sorts of implications for disruption of labor markets moving into the future. Now, again, we could go on and on and on this slide alone, just talking about all the implications of these different types of emerging disruptive technologies. But I think I've made the point sufficiently that with all of these emerging technologies, the nature of work is simply not going to be what it is today in the coming years and decades. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here I grabbed 10 HR trends in the age of artificial intelligence. This is from Jan Meister in her article in Forbes. And I'm not going to take the time to talk through all 10 of these, but I thought it might be useful to at least highlight a couple of them to again, as we're trying to think about the landscape. And I want us to start shifting now and thinking about what this actually really means for performance management. Okay. So let's, number one, AI plus human intelligence enhances the candidate experience. Now, certainly I'm of the opinion that AI is not going to take over. It's not going to be the rise of the machines. It's not going to be Skynet like in the Terminator, I don't think. But AI and machine learning in conjunction with human intelligence is really truly going to transform the way organizations function. And I'm excited about that because I think it'll enhance our capacities and what we're able to get done and the speed at which we're going to be able to get it done. Number 4, I've already mentioned this a little bit, but the new jobs that will be created because of this. And let me put a point on this. We have already a fairly hard time doing a good job with performance management with jobs that have been around for forever, right? For 50, 100 years, jobs that have been around for as long as any of us have been alive. Most organizations kind of struggle with performance management, even of those jobs that we have a lot of experience with. Now, imagine new emerging slate of jobs that come out of this disruptive technology and an organization's response to it. Now, trying to figure out how to assess performance in those jobs in a meaningful way is going to increasingly become a challenge for organizations. And maybe go to number 10, HR call to action, preparing for the future of work. I think it is a team sport. So we have a range of people on this webinar, from CHROs to other HR directors or HR practitioners. I think it's really important to get the best heads together in your organizations now to start to think through the possible implications of these types of disruptive technologies, not just for performance management, but for all aspects of your labor engagement in the workforce. All right, if we can move to the next slide, please. So to put a little bit a finer point on it with a few questions, some strategic HR considerations. What are the core competencies of organizations that are prepared for these technological disruptions? What does this mean for HR budgets and technical footprints? And what is the role and the importance of people analytics within the organizations of the future? And obviously, these are questions that need to be discussed, debated, explored. But I'll tell you, my opinion is that we're going to have a new emerging set of competencies, some of which we can kind of think about now, but some of which we just don't even have any clue about what they are yet as these technological disruptions continue to emerge and take hold. So we have to be very constantly vigilant about thinking about what those core competencies are. Additionally, what does this mean for HR budgets and technical footprints? I think it means we have to be very actively investing in these technologies, period. And if we're not, we're going to lag. And if we get behind the ball when it comes to implementation and integration of AI into our HR systems, and we're going to have a really hard time playing catch up in the future. What is the future role and importance of people analytics? It's how artificial intelligence thrives, right? Is data, big data. The more data it has, the better it functions. And organizations have so much data on all sorts of things within the organization, including people. So many organizations have so much people data that they never actually even utilize in a meaningful way. And so investing in people analytics, not just the systems to do it, but also the people and the software that can analyze it, make sense of the outputs, and then use that in a meaningful way to implement improved performance plans is so vitally crucial for organizations of the future. All right, next slide, please. So some of the types, I tried to think about how do we break down people analytics? So some of the different types of people analytics: workforce planning analytics, talent sourcing analytics, talent acquisition and hiring analytics, onboarding and engagement analytics, employee lifetime value and performance management analytics, talent attrition and retention analytics, employee wellness, health and safety analytics. And I'm sure if we had an open dialogue right now, we could probably come up with a bunch more categories. But these are the ones that kind of popped out as I was thinking about this. So we have all these different types of data that a lot of organizations already have, and we just aren't utilizing it well. And that will become even more important as we move into the future. So for the next, we're running a little bit short on time. Let me, maybe in the next 5 to 7 minutes, talk a little bit more specifically about the performance management analytics stuff. And then we'll end and we'll have questions for the remainder of the time. So if we can go to the next slide. You all know this. I don't think this is rocket science. Performance evaluation systems, the fact that it's a systematic approach to examining employee performance. 4 reasons why we want to try to have that systematic performance evaluation. The evaluation process should encourage positive performance and behavior. It can also be used as a tool to develop employees. It can provide a basis for promotions, raises, provide justification for disciplinary actions or other legal types of actions. And it's a way to satisfy employee curiosity. And I'm sure there's more that we could say, but those 4 alone are certainly justification to try to have good performance systems.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.